Nginike indlebe zama ukuzwisisa lenkulumo elula kaxaka iphalazele mntu wonke jikelele kunganile nkarile iphile kundlula tingwane ingalile kathile inobungcola indlula ezinye.
In the spring of 2024, then Chancellor Carol Christ convened a group of faculty to meet with Cal Performances and to talk about different ways in which we could involve the university community a little bit more in the programming. And I was especially interested in thinking about how we could sort of introduce undergraduates to Cal Performances. And it's, such an amazing resource. And in looking through the calendar of performances for the upcoming year, I was really interested in the concept of the Kentridge performance, which had to do with this famous moment of encounter between French Surrealism and the Negritude movement as it was developing in the Caribbean at the time, early 1940s. And so I had enough lead time that I was able to put together a course that was very much in line with the performance.
I decided to take this course because I was really intrigued by the topic. So Surrealism and Colonialism sounded like a really interesting combination to me. And Surrealism is also very intricately connected to psychoanalysis, and I really like the movement. I also really like the texts that were chosen by Professor Britto. So I was like, this is the perfect course for me.
Especially today when everything is so automated and so planned, I feel like it's very important to incorporate spontaneity. And so Surrealism was kind of all about that for me.
The Great Yes, the Great No was a very recently developed work. I certainly had never seen it. There were no recordings of the performance in its entirety. There were some rehearsal footage that I was able to take a look at. I was a little bit nervous about putting together a syllabus that might end up not necessarily corresponding all that well to what the performance was to be.
Upon taking the course and reading all the literature, I realized this is really, really cool. And I was really fascinated by the different literature that we read.
That reading was important in terms of establishing certain concepts for them. And I think, the Kentridge performance represented Breton in a particular way, and there was a bit of a critical edge to the representation of Breton, which my students appreciated. But there were also a number of references throughout the performance to fundamental concepts that Breton was articulating, for example, in going back to the first manifesto of Surrealism, that weren't necessarily identified as his concepts in the performance, but my students recognized them, and they were able to kind of trace how those concepts moved from Breton writing in the early 1920s in Paris to this group of intellectuals in the Caribbean who were thinking about colonial domination.
After I watched the performance, I started to rethink about Aimé Césair's writings about how he was having this conflicted view about, him being educationally appropriated by the French because he took his higher education in France. But at the same time, he was looking back at his Martinican subjects and saying that you can't really live up to my standards of revolution. I think you're a muted volcano, you're a volcano that's not active.
I definitely think within taking this class, it definitely gave me understanding of different moments within the play, as well as kind of the format. That made a lot of sense to me, surrealism in general. So I could kind of start to pick up on things and overarching themes that I probably would not have understood if I had not taken this class.
My students, they finally understood something on a very fundamental level about the potentialities of surrealist practice. practice through seeing the performance. And I don't think that that's something that they would have experienced with quite that level of intensity without the experience of the performance. Every time a line came up that was from the Surrealist Manifesto or from one of Aimé César's texts or Suzanne César's essays, they would just all be mouthing it to themselves because this kind of amazing recognition of this text that they had experienced in the classroom kind of coming to life in this amazing way with all these different languages, all these different forms of representation. I think that was, an experience that was unlike anything else that happened for them over the course of the semester.